Chapter 14. Where Daniel meets Revelation, the unsealing begins in South Africa, from Case Solved, Mystery of the Treasures of His Heart, 24th of July 2024. Introduction. Some revelations arrive quietly, like a whisper. Others break open the fabric of time, marking a shift in heaven's timetable. This chapter begins in such a moment. What Deborah once thought would be a single book was, in truth, unfolding through her entire life. Her journals, her encounters, her prayers, and the evidence she had unknowingly recorded for years. Her walk with the Creator had become the little scroll, the script written before time and manifested through her lived obedience. As these mysteries began to align, the Creator revealed another astonishing truth. South Africa, a land shaped by suffering, covenant, and divine purpose, would be the place where Daniel's sealed book would begin to open. Just as Israel carried its covenantal identity through exile, oppression, and deliverance, the Afrikaner people carry a lineage and a vow that echo ancient patterns. Their history, from persecution in Europe to migration to the covenant made at Blood River, mirrors the prophetic rhythms described in Daniel. And suddenly, Daniel 11, a chapter long shrouded in symbolism, began to reflect the story of South Africa with striking clarity. It reflects the historical and spiritual journey of the Afrikaner people, culminating in a prophetic climax that precedes divine intervention. As heaven's mysteries emerge, a single message rises with urgency. The bride must prepare. The time of unveiling has begun, and the season foretold by both Daniel and John is drawing near. Warning.
The truth will cut deep, like a knife, and many will be bewildered. Those who reject it will fall further into deception, eventually leading to despair. Those who truly seek the truth must ask the Creator of all to reveal it directly to their hearts, and be willing to receive it.
Case. The scroll, the season, and a call for the bride to prepare.
A couple of days ago, profound truths emerged about how the little scroll in Revelation 10 connects with the book of truth in Daniel.
First, the little scroll was unveiled, and then the book of truth followed. It works like a bridge between the two revelations. As you said earlier, the little scroll is the spearhead for the book of truth. The Creator is using your life to reveal His mysteries, along with the truths, secrets, and revelations woven into them. Everyone who crosses your path becomes part of that little scroll.
I cannot see what the Creator sees within me.
Why do you say that?
I do not feel worthy of any of this. Each time He reveals another layer of His mystery, seen from His perspective, it is so clear and so beautiful that I struggle to believe it has anything to do with me. Years ago, He told me that my story is written in the Bible. I assumed He meant an extension of it, or the true version recorded in heaven. I never fully understood what He meant. When He first spoke to me about the little scroll in 2010 and said that I would write it, I assumed it would simply be a book. Never, at any point, did I imagine that I had already begun writing the little scroll long before I understood what it was. The journal evidence I recorded over the years was its beginning. The little scroll is the record of my walk with God, written in real time through every prayer, every encounter, every revelation. Yet even now, as He unveils these truths, I struggle to feel worthy of receiving them.
Remember, you are all worthy.
The moment I thought I was unworthy and spoke it aloud, an angel came and touched my face, reassuring me that I am worthy. Then I burst into tears. He came immediately and showed me the opposite. It was a clear illustration that the Creator knows our thoughts from afar.
Even before you think it, He already knows what you are going to think.
I began to notice something. A thought would suddenly enter my mind, like the thought, I'm not worthy. It would appear so unexpectedly that I realized it was not merely my own thought. It was as though He placed it there intentionally, to stir something in my heart so that He could demonstrate His divine power by responding to it immediately. Through this, he was showing me how closely he listens, how quickly he hears, and how deeply he is involved in every movement of my heart.
He did the same with the rainbow at Hartenbos. He placed that thought in your heart, the thought to ask him for a rainbow, so that he could show you what happens when a prayer request appears delayed, and how he preserves the greater outcome behind the scenes. It was his way of teaching you that even in delay, his intention is never denial, but alignment with a higher purpose.
As we continue walking this journey, his mysteries, truths, and secrets unfold, and each time the outcome takes us by surprise. It now seems that the Creator will complete the first 12 books by the time the little scroll, parts 1, 2, and 3, is made public, which, within the story, marks the beginning of the tribulation. It will be remarkable to witness how he aligns that timing for the completion of the 12 books, the unveiling of the little scroll, and the onset of the tribulation to converge at the same moment would require a level of precision that only the Creator himself could orchestrate. The bride must prepare. She needs to understand that the tribulation begins with the revealing of the little scroll. This is why the bride should seek his truth now, draw closer to him, and follow his leading with a surrendered heart. When that moment arrives, only those who know his voice will recognize his guidance. We will not know the day or the hour, but we will discern the season, and that season is approaching quickly.
Case. The Book of Truth, the prophetic mirror of South Africa. When the divine connection between Daniel's sealed book and Revelation's little scroll was revealed a few days ago, Deborah began to wonder what the angel Gabriel spoke to Daniel about when he said,
"But first I will tell you what is written in the Book of Truth."
In the book Mystery of the Book of Wars, the Creator said the following about South Africa.
So it's a story about a nation, and just like in the days of Moses of old, so shall you see that same event unfold in this country. That's why this book contains the history of this land, because my people are here, and they have suffered. I'm going to rewrite history for this country. South Africa is holding my shining stars, and a fire will start here and blaze across the world, because my pearl of great price was birthed here. This is their land of milk and honey.
The Afrikaner is a set-apart people, regarded as the Creator's pearl of great price. Within the Afrikaner community runs a distinct bloodline. The Dutch descendants are connected to the tribe of Ephraim, the line of Joseph, while the French Huguenots trace their lineage to the tribe of Judah. Together, these lineages form part of what is known as the lost tribes of Israel. The God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob sent a remnant of his people to South Africa for a specific reason and purpose. The Afrikaner also carries a covenant with the Creator. At Blood River in 1838, our ancestors entered into a solemn agreement with him, a vow made in desperation, faith, and absolute dependence. That covenant mirrors the pattern found throughout Scripture, a people calling on the Creator, pledging themselves to him, and receiving protection and purpose in return. Do you see the biblical pattern?
In Daniel 11:2-45 and Daniel 12:1, the Book of Truth illustrates the evolution of imperial power, covenant conflict, and the appointed hour, revealing a distinct logic of power. Daniel chapter 11 is often approached as a complex sequence of historical events. Yet its deeper purpose is to show how power behaves once it becomes imperial. Rather than functioning solely as chronological history, the chapter serves as a diagnosis of the empire itself. Across generations, names and locations change, but the underlying patterns remain the same. Daniel traces the progression of power from its rise through corruption, into persecution, and ultimately towards collapse, before opening the way for divine intervention. Throughout this illustration, a consistent power logic emerges. Power begins with a mighty ruler exercising personal domination. It becomes systematized through law and administration. It is sacralized through appeal to a higher principle or ideology. It expands until it claims total authority. And finally, it applies pressure to conscience, persecuting covenantal faith. What follows is a prophetic illustration of the Book of Truth, captured in Daniel 11:2-45 and Daniel 12:1, using South African history. Daniel 11:2-4, the birth of the imperial idea. Daniel 11:2-4 introduces the rise of what Scripture calls a mighty king, a ruler who acts according to his own will. This moment marks the birth of the imperial idea, power that is unchecked, personal, and absolute. Historically, this pattern is illustrated by Alexander the Great, whose conquests were not merely territorial but civilizational, spreading a unified culture under a single will. Although his kingdom fractured after his death, the imperial idea itself did not die. It continued through history as power learned to survive beyond the individual ruler. That imperial idea matured further under Julius Caesar, who transformed conquest into governance. Power was no longer dependent on personality alone, but became centralized, permanent, and bureaucratic through law. As empire developed, it was eventually sacralized under the Roman Catholic Church, where authority was clothed in sacred legitimacy, dissent became heresy, and unity became a moral obligation. This sanctified empire reached a decisive expression under Louis XIV of France, who enforced religious and political uniformity through state power. The revocation of the Edict of Nantes and the persecution of the French Huguenots reveal the outcome of sanctified authority. Once power believes itself holy, persecution of conscience is justified as righteousness. Daniel 11:5, the King of the South, the Covenant Remnant. In Daniel 11:5, the narrative shifts away from imperial centers toward what Scripture calls the King of the South. In this prophetic illustration, the South represents not dominance, but displacement, a remnant moving away from persecuting power. Historically, this is reflected in the migration of French Huguenot refugees to the Cape of Good Hope. These refugees carried with them a covenantal faith, rooted in scripture and conscience, which became embedded among the Afrikaner people. Theologically, this movement illustrates a recurring biblical truth. God does not preserve truth through empire, but through remnant communities who carry faith across generations. Daniel 11:6-19, systematized empire expands. Daniel 11:6-19 describes the expansion of a systematized imperial power, now represented as the King of the North. Power is no longer personal, but organized, administrative, and impersonal. War becomes industrial rather than heroic, and domination is executed through machinery rather than kings. In prophetic illustration, this stage corresponds to the British Empire and its expansion into southern Africa. The annexation of the Cape, followed by the Anglo-Boer Wars, reflects this imperial logic. Fortified places are taken, farms are burned, families are displaced, and scorched earth policies are implemented. Concentration camps reveal how empire no longer seeks merely to defeat opponents, but to dismantle entire societies. At this stage, empire does not conquer kings, it destroys communities. Daniel 11:20, the oppressor, tax collector. Daniel 11:20 marks a transition from overt conquest to administrative domination. Power now expresses itself through taxation, bureaucracy, and extraction rather than battlefield victory. Historically, this is illustrated by British colonial administration in South Africa from 1902 to 1961. Control becomes systemic and embedded in institutions. Theological meaning emerges here. Oppression becomes increasingly invisible, normalized, and difficult to resist, as domination is exercised through law rather than force. Daniel 11:21-24, the vile person arises. Daniel 11:21-24 introduces a ruler described as vile, one who gains authority not through honor but through intrigue. Power at this stage relies on ideology, manipulation, and promises rather than legitimacy. In prophetic illustration, this pattern is applied to the rise of the African National Congress, ANC, which came to power in 1994 through a liberation narrative, but later captured the state and established ideological dominance. Loyalty was secured through patronage and redistribution, while corruption hollowed out institutions. The power logic is clear. When covenant is rejected, authority seeks legitimacy through ideology. Daniel 11:25-28, North versus South, the internal conflict. In Daniel 11:25-28, conflict shifts from foreign invasion to internal domination. The struggle is no longer between nations, but within the nation itself. In prophetic illustration, this manifests as centralized state power opposing covenantal communities. Land expropriation, attacks on farmers, linguistic and cultural suppression, racialized legislation, and institutional warfare reflect this internal conflict. Theologically, this marks a critical moment. Empire no longer fights external enemies, but wages war against its own people. Daniel 11:30-31, Rage against the Holy Covenant. Daniel 11:30-31 declares that the northern power shall rage against the Holy Covenant and pollute the sanctuary. In Daniel, the emphasis is clear: the covenant is attacked and replaced with abomination. In this prophetic illustration, the covenant mirrors the vow of the Battle of Blood River in 1838, a public, binding covenant made to God, promising obedience and remembrance, and functioning as a spiritual identity marker for a people. The abomination of desolation is therefore not merely a physical object, but the replacement of covenant with ideology. It symbolizes the overturning of spiritual foundations, the desecration of what was dedicated to God, the corruption of institutions, and legislation against faith, morality, and righteousness. Corrupt rulers rage against covenant, because covenant places moral limits on power. Daniel 11:32-35, The Faithful Remnant. Daniel 11:32-35 shifts focus to the faithful remnant. The people who know their God shall stand firm. These are those who remain loyal to covenant under pressure. They instruct many, endure suffering, and are refined through trials. In prophetic illustration, this remnant includes Afrikaner families preserving faith, communities remembering and teaching the vow, farmers standing despite persecution, and households refusing godless ideology. Pastors, teachers, and parents guard truth across generations. Daniel highlights that purification occurs through affliction. Faithfulness, not dominance, carries the promise forward, and a refined remnant emerges through persecution. Daniel 11:36-39, The Self-Exalting King. Daniel 11:36-39 reveals the final form of corrupt power, a self-exalting ruler who sets himself above God, dishonors what is sacred, and worships power itself. This ruler honors foreign ideologies, divides land, and corrupts society. In prophetic mirror, this reflects ideological leadership that rejects biblical foundations, persecutes those aligned with truth, and uses division to maintain control. At this stage, imperial arrogance is fully revealed, no longer disguised by morality or legitimacy. Daniel 11:40-45, The Final Conflict and Collapse. Daniel 11:40-45 describes the final conflict and the collapse of the northern power. At the time of the end, resistance begins to emerge, socially, legally, economically, and spiritually. In response, the state intensifies repression, overreach, and persecution. Yet the outcome is decisive. Corrupt power enters crisis, loses allies, turns inward, and collapses under its own corruption. Daniel's verdict is absolute. He shall come to his end, and none shall help him. Daniel 12:1, the appointed hour. Daniel 12:1 lifts the vision beyond collapse to divine intervention.
At that time Michael, the great prince who protects your people, will arise.
When human power reaches its limit, heaven intervenes. This is the moment when the covenant people are remembered, defended, and delivered. Just as in the days of Moses, just as in the days of Esther, and just as in every generation where a remnant stood firm, help arises from the heavenly realms at the appointed hour. And so it will be again, for South Africa, for the covenant people, and for all who love truth. Daniel's prophecy does not end with collapse, but with awakening, deliverance, and resurrection hope. The collapse of corrupt power is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of the moment heaven has been waiting for. Therefore, Daniel 11 exposes the full life cycle of imperial power, while Daniel 12 reveals that heaven intervenes precisely when that power believes itself invincible, preserving covenant, refining the remnant, and awakening hope beyond collapse. This chapter is part of a larger work. The truth continues in the next chapter.